regular problems that I hear employers complaining about is the difficulty they have in terminating the employment of a suitable or an unsuitable employee. And they have a view, and it may be perfectly understandable, that a lot of the employment legislation in Ireland is stacked in favour of the employee and makes it difficult for an employer to pick and choose who they want to employ and terminate employment when and if the need arises. Because there are very sort of specific prescribed circumstances in which you can terminate the employment of somebody, and outside of that it can be difficult. In this video, if you're an employer, a small employer, and you're concerned about this, I'm going to give you 2 tips which might prove useful. The first thing is, when you're giving a contract of employment to your employee, make absolutely sure you've got a good, robust probation clause in it. This clause initially will probably be for 6 months, but you should ensure that it's extendable to 11 months. This gives you plenty of time to ascertain and decide whether the employee is right for your business or not. If you can't figure it out in 11 months, well, then you have a difficulty. But you should be able to sort it out in 11 months and decide whether the employee is right for you or not. The second thing, or second aspect of the probation clause, is that you want to make sure that it makes provision for termination during the probation period on 1 week's notice. I have seen contracts of employment where there is a probation period in the contract, but they don't make provision for a specific notice period during probation, and the contract itself then has a notice period of either a month or perhaps 3 months. And in that situation, it's actually very strongly arguable, I believe, by the employee that even though they are being terminated during probation, in the absence of a specific termination period or notice period of a week, then the employee is entitled to either the month or 3 months, whatever is provided for in the contract of employment itself. Otherwise, it would, in my view, be a breach of contract situation. So that's the first thing that you need to do if you're a small employer and you're concerned about being able to terminate employees or not. The second thing you could do is consider the use of fixed term contracts. So at the outset, the contract is going to be for either 1 year or 2 years or whatever period of time suits you and suits your business. But the bottom line is that on the expiry of the fixed term, there's no obligation on you to renew the contract, and the invoking of the unfair dismissals legislation would be set aside by a specific clause in the contract which would say that the unfair dismissals legislation will not apply simply due to the termination of the employment contract on the expiry period coming around. So if it's at the end of 12 months or at the end of 2 years, once that period is up, the contract terminates automatically, and the employer has the opportunity to renew it, to extend it, or not to do so. But he will have set aside, if the contract is drafted correctly, he'll have set aside the unfair dismissals legislation being used simply because the contract is not being renewed. So if you're an employer, small employer, things are not quite as bad as you may think, but you do need to be sensible and careful and prudent at the outset in granting or giving contracts of employment. And to summarise, I would recommend that you consider a well drafted and robust probation period, which will allow you to decide whether the person is right for your business or not. It will also allow them to decide whether you're right for them or not. And secondly, you could use fixed term contracts quite widely. I hope you find this video useful. If you do, you might give us a thumbs up down below and subscribe to my YouTube channel. I'm Terry Gorry. I'm a solicitor in Enfield, County Meath. I do quite a bit of employment law and law in relation to small business, property and so